Goody Macabre presents Erasmus's Eternity. What is it to be loved? Most people long to know, but it eludes them. Then there are couples with a love that shines brighter than 1,000 suns, and they shine no matter who their fire burns. For so long she waited, in a deep abyss of timelessness, until suddenly Clara Vale emerged into the present day. Erasmus Vale, her husband and true love, inexplicably was there waiting. His eyes, those portals to an age-old soul, glistened with boundless adoration, yet shimmered with unspeakable secrets. Erasmus and Clara, with star-crossed destinies so dark and profound, found happiness in their long-awaited reunion. They wandered the globe as Erasmus introduced her to a new era in time, so very different than the one they'd known together. Clara marveled at the modern magic of technology, a world that seemed liberated beyond anything she could have fathomed in her day. And oh, the sun. Clara could not get enough of the daylight after spending so many years sunless, so many years with those terrible noises echoing in the void. She soaked up the sunlight, and Erasmus indulged her, flying them from coast to coast. It was a waking dream for them both, being together after spending generations apart. Neither one dared speak of what that time separated from each other was like. Not a second could be wasted after all that loneliness and yearning for each other. There was too much to make up for. That doesn't mean neither one of them wondered. One evening, Clara, reveling in Erasmus's beauty unmarred by a lengthy life he'd obviously survived with nary a scratch, pondered how such a thing could be. Was he immortal? Her mind, once shackled by her own cursed eternity, now soared free and curious. "Erasmus, love of my life," she began, her voice soft yet tinged with trepidation. "The tale of my curse is known to you, but your own immortality, your body remains unaged, unchanged. Tell me, I implore, the path that led you to defy death's inexorable claim." Erasmus's eyes, always beacons of love now that Clara was back in his life, flickered with fear. His heart, hardened by time and trauma, dropped in a kind of terror he hadn't known in a century. He had known that this moment, where the truth might surface like a cadaver in a tranquil lake, was inevitable. He was afraid to speak the words aloud, but he would not deny Clara this. He must let her know. He must forewarn her. Erasmus began to tell Clara his tale. In their life together, before the Bronze, Erasmus was not just a jeweler but a seeker of arcane knowledge. His forays into the supernatural were driven by an obsession with eternal life. This obsession was born not from a fear of death, but of his love for Clara and the dread of a day without her. But then came that fateful day when his dabbling in magic to keep Clara alive was the very reason that his Clara was taken from him. After Clara was gone, Erasmus could think of nothing else but how he would find the way to hold her in his arms again. The obsession became insanity. He mingled in the dankest alleys of the underworld, where he heard rumors of the existence of a forbidden tome known as the Grimoire Infinitus. Legend spoke of the spellbook granting powers and undying life to those who dared to comprehend its eldritch knowledge, those who dared to turn the right page. Erasmus came to believe that the grimoire was the only way he could ever be reunited with Clara. Only immortality would give him the precious time he needed to figure out how to set her free and live the life together they had been denied. One would think that Erasmus had learnt his lesson about playing with magic that he didn't understand. But there could be no reasoning. There could only be Clara and he, forever. So began Erasmus' quest for the Grimoire Infinitus. It was an odyssey into the unspeakable, beyond the fragile boundaries of mortal comprehension. The grimoire was shielded by spectral guardians in a domain between life and death. Erasmus, to acquire it, pushed his body beyond its limit. A misery we'll save for another tale. No matter to him, he willingly tread into its realm, sailing a sea of tears where lost souls wept, crossing a vast desert where the forsaken howled. Gloomier still, a forever war unknown to mortals raged in this netherworld. All creatures within had to pick a side, each side with unclear boundaries of right and wrong. And Erasmus was no exception to this rule. Through all the filth of war, it was the gate of sorrows that nearly thwarted Erasmus's resolve. A portal safeguarded by the spectral, screeching echoes of every heart ever broken led the path to the dismal gateway to the grimoire. Here, Erasmus had to relive every pain, every anguish of every being that ever dwelt in the realm of the living. He heard their cries, felt their despair, and for moments that seemed like eons, he bore the weight of sorrowful anguish. It shattered him, yet from the debris of his shattered spirit he arose, for the image of Clara, glowing with celestial beauty and eternal love, guided him. Thus he conquered the abyss, securing the book to make his way back to the land of the living. All the while, Erasmus was unaware that the seeds of a malevolent irony were being sown, fated to blossom in the tapestry of his strange existence. 100 years passed while Erasmus made his way through the nether realm, fighting his way through wars. After all that he had endured to finally possess the grimoire's promise of undying life, Erasmus had to make a deal with a malevolent spirit, known in hushed whispers as the Shadow Sentry. Erasmus, blinded by his pursuit, conceded to the sentry's vile demand, sacrifice his most cherished emotion. Love, the very thing he sought to preserve through time, was stripped from him, and in its place a void and dark eternal was left. Erasmus recounted this tale, his voice hollow and dry. Clara, her heart pounding at the thought of all he had endured, peered into Erasmus's eyes, witnessing for the first time the sorrow within. You sacrificed our love to save me," she whispered, each word dripping with agony and understanding. He nodded, memories swelling behind his eyes. "I was a prisoner of my own making. I thought I could endure any torment, bear any burden, so long as it ensured we would be together. I should have told you about the talisman. It wasn't until you were taken from me, sentenced as a witch and lost to the aeons, that I considered how you might suffer by its power. Forgive me, my love. I just wanted you to live." He took a shuddering breath, his eyes lighting with renewed fervor. "Something inexplicable occurred when you were cursed by the bronze finger. Somehow your love, Clara, it defied the sacrifice, lingered, and tethered me to an emotion I was meant to no longer comprehend. The last words of love you whispered to me that awful night saved me. Somehow your curse became my salvation." It was then, as Clara wrestled with a tumult of emotions, love, horror, pity, a ghastly suspicion crept over her. The Shadow Sentry, an entity born of enmity and sustained by the relinquished emotions of its victims, had always intended this cruel irony. The accident that led to the amputation of her finger, the infection, the witch hunt, all of it. Had it all been the machinations of this evil creature? For the emotion Erasmus sacrificed, love, was the very thing that could subdue the Sentry's malevolence. A love so potent, so defiant, that even when hatred tried to snuff it out, it lingered, undying. Clara embraced Erasmus, his haunted tears falling into her raven hair as she consoled him. The moment did not last. A creeping sensation overcame them as the air grew dense. Shadows writhed as a formless dread enveloped Erasmus. The hairs on the back of Clara's neck stood up. Erasmus had let his guard down. The sentry, sensing thoughts of itself, feeling the surge of Clara and Erasmus's powerful love, was awakened. Angered, it would seek to extinguish the two who dared defy it. A voice, a cacophony of hoarse screams, pierced through the night. "You thought you could deceive me, Erasmus, but your love, it shall be your doom." The voice shuddered through them, emanating from every shadow around. Paralyzed by an infernal power, they watched in alarm as the shadows began to writhe and twist, converging into a form so grotesque, so antithetical to life, that their minds recoiled in sheer terror. "No!" Erasmus bellowed as he protectively stepped in front of Clara, his hands raising to defend them. Then, a maelstrom of light and shadow clashed in a cataclysm. Erasmus, igniting with an electric glow of defiance, wielded the ancient and forbidden magics he'd gleaned from the cursed pages of the grimoire. Each spell, a symphony of power and despair, collided against the Sentry's dark shade essence, with a ferocity that shocked Clara and sent her reeling for shelter. She watched helplessly. Freed from her bronze curse, she believed herself no longer an entity of enchantment. The atmosphere spiraled into chaos as Erasmus uttered incantations that sought to bind, repel, and obliterate the sentry. His voice, though powerful, wavered with the strain of maintaining spells that threatened to consume his very soul. Flames of white light chains forged by forgotten deities and light energy swords honed on the anvil of time itself emerged, danced, and clashed against the indomitable tide of shadows that the sentry wielded. Erasmus, his immortal frame trembling, eyes ablaze with the instinct to protect Clara, was gradually succumbing to the inexhaustible malice of his adversary. For every sable spectre he vanquished, more arose, and slowly the luminous defenses he erected began to crumble beneath the relentless onslaught of the shades. The sentry, an entity of malevolence and endless void, bore down upon Erasmus whispers of despair to entangle his spirit. Erasmus, on the brink of oblivion, shouted out Clara's name mournfully. The reverb of his final plea was all that Clara heard as Erasmus was pulled into the shadows. And then suddenly, silence. How does one dare to love who they desire when the forces of darkness tear lovers apart over and over again? Erasmus and the sentry were gone, dissipated into the void. Her love had saved him, freed him from his self-wrought purgatory. But loving had been his undoing, casting him into the oblivion he had rescued her from. Clara remained, not alone amidst an endless expanse of nothingness, but alone, apart from Erasmus again. Brought to her knees by the shock of it all, she wept silent tears. It was all too easy, of course, a voice said. It seemed to come from all sides. I told him this day would come. The hairs on the back of Clara's neck stood up. She trembled, unable to catch her breath, and too afraid to look up at what nightmare creature was there to finish her off. "Who are you? What do you want?" she sputtered breathlessly. Air swirled around as mist coalesced before Clara, forming the shape of a man. She drew in a gasp of surprise. The voice now had a face that chuckled before it spoke again, quite arrogantly. "I am Simeon,